Nearly 10 million ounces of gold resources through acquisition. This 50-cent stock has received a $2.65 price target from Cantor Fitzgerald. It's the one must-own precious metal stock according to New York Times bestselling author and fund manager Marin Katusa. Learn more at futuremoneytrends.com/goldstock. Greetings and thank you for joining us at futuremoneytrends.com. I have what is probably the rising star of YouTube, at least in the economic world, the X22 report.com, probably one of the most fact-finding and data-based YouTube channels out there, with daily reports on the YouTube channel. You can also see his blog at X22 Report. I'm here with Dave. He's the owner of the site and chief editor and even interviewer for some of his spotlight interviews. And he has a financial background. He's worked for Merrill Lynch, went the Series 7 route, but has decided to really run his own show and take the research that he's finding and the shocking truths that he's revealed and taking it to as many people as possible. And his site is something that's definitely worth checking out and bookmarking. That's x22report.com. Dave, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Dave, I want to kind of take a detour here just because it's such a hot topic. And I know you are so well researched in much of the news and what's going on behind the scenes. I wanted to talk about the primaries just briefly here. The people are revolting, and that's my opinion, of course, when you look at Sanders, when you look at Trump. But, you know, in your opinion, is the revolt too late? With Trump and Sanders, maybe they're not even the right guys, of course. But is the oligarchy at this point, is it just too late for the people to revolt with the power of, let's call it the voting booth?
Well, I actually like that the people are out there and they're expressing their views and they're looking at Trump as someone completely different than who we've had in the past. If you listen to Trump, he just tells it the way it is. He doesn't really mince words. And if it's on his mind, he just tells you what it is. That I do like about Trump. Now, do I think it's going to make a difference in the long run? Most likely not, because what we're seeing right now is the elites, the upper echelon, they're very nervous about him. And you can see from everything they're throwing out in the corporate media about all these different things about him and what he's about, because they really don't want him to be president. But I like that the people are saying, you know something, we want something different here in the country. We want someone in the office who's completely different, who has his own money, that doesn't have to accept money from foreign governments, from central banks, from corporations. But what I'm seeing is that the elite, the upper echelon, I don't know if they're going to allow a person into office that they cannot control. I mean, if we look at John F. Kennedy, we saw what happened to him. They couldn't control him. He wasn't doing what they wanted. They took him out. The same thing with Trump. Now, the question is, will they allow him into office? Will they remove him? And when I say remove, I'm talking about kill him before the elections, or will he get into office, he'll be in office, and all of a sudden we will see a hit? Now, I don't know, but I can see, I don't know if they'll allow him to stay in this position if he is elected into office. And we know right now that the elections, they're kind of manipulated, almost like all the statistical information in the country about financial aspects like GDP, inflation, unemployment. We know that the elections are manipulated, massaged in certain ways. We know we have the Electoral College. We know that a lot of this is driven to have the person they want into office. But going back to your question, I do like that the people are speaking out and the people are saying, listen, this is what we want. We want change. And I don't really think it matters who it is at this point, as long as they're telling the truth, the person's sticking up for the people, and there is some type of change in office.
Yeah, you bring up a really good point, because Trump doesn't so much as have a belief system. He's not a libertarian. He's not a conservative. He's not a liberal. He's just a guy. He reminds me of like when I go to people's houses or have family gatherings and just people are at the kitchen table talking. They just have that viewpoint of, hey, this is what we should do. And Trump, of course, he's speaking from an executive background. And of course, when he does get in office, if he does get in office, it's not going to be as easy as he thinks to get things done. But it is interesting the predicament the oligarchs are in, because if Trump is the nominee, I mean, man, the choice couldn't be clear, because Hillary Clinton, they fully control.
Yes. Now, she is completely controlled. They want her in the White House. And you can see that they're pushing and doing whatever they possibly can to get her into that position. And I'm not really Republican. I'm not really Democrat. I want someone in office that is going to work for the people, not for corporations, not for foreign governments, not for the central banks, but for the people, doing things for the people. And if we can get someone like that, that would be a great start in changing things. But we'll have to see what happens down the road here.
Yeah, my fear for the last 10 years has always been that like a person like a Ron Paul or a Rand Paul gets in, and then the whole damn thing implodes on them. And of course, then you don't have a libertarian type candidate for the next 100 years.
Yeah.
But let's get into the economy. So 2016, the world is without a doubt in a recession. Europe, South America, Asia. The U.S. is, I think it's in a structural depression. I think you'd probably agree. But we're not in that official recession. What do you think's in store for the U.S. economy right now? What do you think the biggest, developing story might be for 2016 in the U.S. economy?
Well, what I've been looking at for the past couple of years now is everything in all different sectors of the economy. I've been looking at real estate. I've been looking at the job situation, GDP, manufacturing, and pretty much almost everything. And what we've been seeing in the economy is that each one of these sectors has basically declined. They're not improving. Most of them are flatline. And I know the corporate media is out there trying to make us believe that everything is fine, real estate is fine, retail is fine, unemployment is down to 4.9%. But in the past, 4 months, we've been seeing a lot of layoffs. We know that like Cisco Corp, they laid off 1,200 people. We know that Chicago State University laid off about 900, Penn State 1,100 people. Sears is a complete disaster. They're closing stores. Sports Authority, they just declared bankruptcy. They're going to be closing about 250 stores or so. And this is just a small aspect. And then we go to the tech sector, and we see mass layoffs in the tech sector. Now, you know what happens when layoffs occur. That means companies are contracting. They're cutting costs. They're not doing the sales the way they did it back in the good old days. So they have to let people go. And this is what we're seeing now. Now, if people are being laid off, my question is, where are they going to find these jobs? Because we see the retail market, all the stores that have been closing, Barnes & Noble, Sears, JCPenney, Sports Authority, which I just mentioned, they're laying off not 10, 20, 30 people, but thousands of people. And they have to get jobs. Where are they going to get jobs? Now, if everyone can't find jobs, they go to becoming a waiter or waitress or taking a part-time job. And we lose the full-time jobs, which we've been seeing. Manufacturing has been declining. We've been losing manufacturing jobs. We've been losing jobs in the energy sector. And when you add all of this up, if you go back to June of 2014 to January of 2016, we lost over 1 million jobs. Now remember, the U.S. government back in 2013, they got rid of the department that counts layoffs. They said because of budgetary constraints, we need to get rid of that department. So what we're seeing right now are all these layoffs. Now, if all these layoffs are occurring, now I know the government is telling us we're at 4.9% unemployment, but a lot of these people can't find jobs. And remember, if you're not actively looking and on an interview within the 4 weeks time period, they count you as no longer looking for a job. Even though you're still putting out your resume and you still want a job, they're just not counting you. You've fallen off. So those people aren't even counted.
Yeah, and we should note that that's a survey too. And in the 90s, they stopped surveying as many. They reduced, I think, the inner cities from like 50,000 like down to 20,000. So, I mean, it is a survey as well. I mean, this is like them taking a poll, and it's the government taking the poll. It's not like Gallup. This is like an uncredible organization taking this survey.
Right, that's absolutely right. And even the part-time jobs, it's funny because they count part-time as a full-time job, but when you're laid off from your part-time job, and this is different for each state, if you're not working, the 25 to 30 hours per week, you're not counted as being laid off, which is amazing. If you got 2 part-time jobs, they count that as 2 full-time jobs. So the whole thing is completely manipulated. So when you see all this happening, this has ripple effects into the economy. Because if all these people are out of work, they are scared. And then the people that are working in these corporations, they see people being laid off. And I remember back in 2008, when I worked for Tia Kref, there was mass layoffs going on, and everyone was very nervous. And when you see this happening, you don't want to spend your money. You're nervous. You don't know if it's your time next. And basically, you start saving your money. You're keeping your money. You don't have the discretionary funds, or you don't want to use the discretionary funds to go out and make major purchases. And we're starting to see that in the economy, and that ripples down into the manufacturing, into the Baltic Dry Index, and so forth. And we're starting to see all of this now come together. And those students who are going to college, who are graduating, who have a huge amount of debt, they're finding it very difficult to find the full-time paying jobs in their majors. And I know a lot of people that have been graduating, a lot of family members that have been graduating, and a lot of them are still living with their parents. They have part-time jobs, and they're just trying to get by. And this is why the government stepped in and modified the student loans and based it on your income, because they realized that a lot of these kids, they're not getting the jobs. And if they're not getting the jobs, they're not saving the money. If they're not saving the money, they're not going out and purchasing a home. And if we look at the real estate market, we see the real estate market really hasn't gone anywhere in the last couple of years, going back to 2009. It's been pretty much flatline. The buyers that are coming in are foreign investors, investment funds, hedge funds, buying the homes in cash. And I don't know if you remember this, but back in 2013, when Obama was in Phoenix, Arizona in August of 2013, telling everyone that the real estate market is back on track, in August, September, October, and going forward of that year, we had JP Morgan Chase, Bank of America, Wells Fargo laying off thousands of people in the mortgage department. It makes no sense. Why would you get rid of the mortgage department if more people are purchasing homes? You wouldn't. So who are these purchasers? They're not the everyday American, and this is why the mortgage applications really are flatline. They're declining. They're not really doing what they did prior to 2008, and this is why the real estate market hasn't gone anywhere. And when I look around the country, I see the real estate market falling apart in certain areas. Now, it's not in every single area. It spreads across the country, and each area is affected at different times. But I see in the Northeast, a lot of houses are for sale. They've been on the market for 120 days. They've been lowering their prices, and it's becoming more and more difficult. Actually, my sister-in-law is trying to sell her townhouse. It's been on the market now for 7 months.
Wow.
And she's lowered the price 4 times, cannot sell it. Actually, there's no one even coming to take a look. That's how bad it is. So it's not in every single area, but it is spreading, and we saw this back in 2007 going into 2008, because I remember My sister-in-law worked in Florida. She told me real estate was booming, and it was. It was speculators. Real estate was incredible. And we lived in New York. Houses weren't selling. There was no traffic, and I couldn't understand what was going on here. Why no traffic there? But real estate was incredible in the Fort Lauderdale, Miami area. And then 6 to 8 months later, it all spread down to Florida, because it was all basically a domino effect. We saw it out in California, spread across the country, and basically we had this huge, huge problem. I see the same exact thing happening right now. What I call it is a central bank bubble. It looks like everything right now is blown up by the central bank. The American people are sitting on the sidelines, and a lot of these bubbles are going to pop. And going through this year of 2016, I see a lot of these bubbles getting ready to burst. They're basically deflating right now. And if we look at other countries like Canada, Australia, they're already seeing their real estate markets fall apart. I remember just a year ago in Canada, they were like, oh, real estate, it's going higher and higher. It's incredible. It's never going to go down. And all of a sudden, in certain areas, it's a complete disaster. Australia just reported that their real estate, their bubble is starting to pop. So we're going to see this spread all over the place. And I don't think it's just going to be one sector this time. I think it's going to hit everywhere, and it's going to be a complete disaster.
So that would leave us with what I had said earlier. Does anybody even want to be the next president? Because it seems as if this thing is ready to implode. What are your suggestions for people who are looking at a really bad economy, or at least what Future Money Trends, what we've been forecasting and calling for a long time, for years now, it's basically a structural depression that's going to last into the early 2020s, just because of the headwinds you just mentioned and the central banks really making the 2008 crisis much, much worse for what's coming. What do you suggest people do?
Well, I'm saying that people should prepare for what is coming. Now, I'm not saying that the U.S. is going to come to an end. We're going to be sunk into a huge, deep hole, and we're never going to be able to get out. What I'm saying is the world, the way we see it today, is going to change. And I just believe at this point that people need to be ready for this change. We've seen other countries go through the change. And I think what's going to happen when this whole entire system freezes up, and you can't go to the bank, you can't take out money, the dollar is devalued to nothing, people are going to have a problem. Credit markets are going to freeze up, deliveries to stores are going to come to a halt, and at this point, I think people need to have food. I think people need to have water. I think people need to have precious metals. People need to have some type of weapon to protect themselves, toiletries. They need to have these supplies on hand to weather the storm, because you know what's going to happen after the storm is over. Things are going to be rebuilt. People are going to come out and look around to see what has happened here. But during this time period, you need to be ready for what is coming, because as we can see already, things are shifting from the west out to the east. We see Russia, China. They are amassing a huge amount of gold, and they're basically duplicating everything that we have here in the U.S., like the SWIFT system. We see Russia and China duplicating the system. We see China making bilateral trade agreements with many different countries, of course not the U.S. The U.S. is not involved in this. We see clearinghouses for the yuan. We know the yuan is going to be put into the basket of SDRs come this fall. We know there's going to be yuan gold price fix starting in April. So a lot of changes are coming. And for the U.S. at this point, this entire fiat system is a system that is slowly, and has been dying for 40 plus years since we came off the gold standard. And I don't see any hope at this point, because we have too much debt. It cannot be sustained. And the amount of revenue coming into the government, even though they continually try to bring in more revenue through Obamacare, through FATCA, through many different ways. Well, they're going to try the carbon tax, but they're trying to bring in more and more revenue to basically keep the system alive. And if you look at the debt situation throughout the world, it can't be sustained. This is why Christine Lagarde from the IMF said this would be a really great time to have some type of 10% wealth tax on the people to pay down the debt. Now, they don't want to pay it off. They just want to keep the system alive, because you have to remember, their product is debt. Their product is to spread debt around the world, because with that debt, they take the natural resources from the countries, and this is how they become very, very wealthy. They're not working for the people. They're working for themselves. So when this whole thing starts to fall apart, people will need to be prepared for what is coming.
Dave, we're seeing technology basically on a parabolic curve right now. I mean, within 5 years, less than 5 years, many of us won't be driving our cars anymore. Probably in 10 years, we'll probably have robots serving us coffee at restaurants. And, you know, I've already got this. I mean, I'm sure a lot of people do, but, you know, this little vacuum that runs around the house, cleaning the house, I'm sure it's going to get more advanced. I'm sure there'll be lawnmowers and everything else. But for the technology I want to talk about is the digital currencies, Bitcoin, private currencies, maybe, Amazon or Walmart or Microsoft will come out with a digital cash. Because I think Bitcoin's biggest negative is that it doesn't have a source or a founder that's public. And I think that makes a lot of people probably older than, I'd say 35 and older, probably really nervous, because there's just no, I think if it was Microsoft digital Bitcoin cash, everybody would get it. It would be real simple for everybody and they trust it. But do you see the digital currencies rising here as part of the reset, or do you think the central banks are going to squash these things?
I think if the central bank can take control of it, I think this is definitely where they're going to want to move, because we can see already the central bank is looking to have a digital currency by having a cashless society. There are already rumblings about this. They're already saying that the euro is saying that they're going to get rid of the 500 euro note. Mm-hmm. We hear Larry Summers saying that we should get rid of the $100 bill. So they're already pushing us in this direction. And most of our transactions today are electronic. Not many people, people do still use cash, but a lot of people just go to the store, they use your debit card, their Visa, their MasterCard, the American Express, whatever they have, and they do everything electronically already. So what I see is it would work as long as the central bank is not involved. If the U.S. government came out and basically issued an electronic currency or based it on something, whatever it's going to be, and there was no interest attached to it, I can see that working in some way. But if the central bank has it, doesn't matter if it's physical, electronic, they're always going to have governments borrow it. They're always going to attach interest on it. And that type of system will never succeed. Yes, in the early stages, you get the illusion that everything is fine because the interest is very low. But over time, we end up in the same exact position we are today. A huge amount of debt that can never be paid back because all the currency that was borrowed had interest attached to it. And that brings me to, why do we need the central bank? Why do we need them to create anything? I mean, right now, they still print cash, but a lot of it is just a push of a button. They create this electronic currency, they loan it to the government, and they attach interest on it. Why can't the government just push a button with no interest attached? It makes no sense.
It is totally absurd, and it's mind-boggling for people listening to this. The way our currency is created, and what Dave is saying, it's the worst way possible to create money. You could have a gold commodity-backed currency. You could have a treasury-issued greenback, which they had in the 1800s, where the government just makes the money, but there's no debt behind it. The way our money is created is truly horrendous and mind-boggling, because they literally, in order for the money to be created, it's loaned into existence. Well, if something's loaned into existence, there's now interest attached to it. So even if you paid back the loan, you can't pay back the loan without more money being created. And I think that's what everybody doesn't understand. They just don't print money. They actually loan it into existence, which right. Chris Martenson on his video, The Crash Course, series back, I don't know, probably 10 years ago now. He explained it really well. But yeah, it is the worst possible way. So, well, hey, just to wrap this up, looking at the next few years here, I think it is safe to say that there's going to be a massive reset, change, call it whatever. If someone goes to X22report.com, they can subscribe via email to your. Is it a daily alert or a weekly alert?
The subscription is free. First of all, it just lets you know that. It tells you when the report is coming out. And what I do is I do a report Monday through Friday, one on the weekend. So you will get an alert every day. You'll also get an alert when I post an interview with someone that I interviewed, and that's on the X22 Report Spotlight YouTube channel. So everything that I do is free for everyone. You can go to YouTube. You can come to my site. I have the audio on the X22 Report. I have the video version on the YouTube channel. But I don't charge a fee or anything like that. This is open to the public to hear what's really going on in the U.S. and around the world.
X22report.com. Dave, thank you so much for your time. And hey, hope to touch base with you in perhaps 3 or 4 weeks.
All right. Thanks a lot, man.